Welcome to the Wayne Bennett podcast, celebrating West Virginia's people, places, and the culture of Southern Appalachia. Now here's your host, Wayne Bennett.
Welcome to the Easy Come, Easy Go broadcast. My name is Wayne Bennett, and this is our 7th episode. And I didn't schedule a guest this week because my wife and I had our second COVID shot on Friday, and we weren't sure how we were going to react to it, and so we didn't schedule a guest. And everything went great as far as the shot was concerned. We went to the armory, stayed in the car, very well organized, kind of cool, the wind blowing, I felt sorry for a lot of the volunteers, but they did an excellent job, and we were in and out of there in less than an hour, and it was very efficient. And luckily for she and I, we haven't had any side effects, and everything went well. But today we're going to talk about a couple of things. And first of all, when we had Dennis Pike on here in the first and third episode, he talked about bands around the Beckley area that played in clubs and festivals and things like that. Well, back in the 60s, early 70s, there were also several high school groups or bands, and they couldn't play in the clubs that sold alcohol or anything. They basically played at parties, they played at proms and homecoming dances or any special dances that people had. Places like Teen Town, Maxwell Hill Community Center around Beckley had people could rent it and have a band and charge to get in. So that was always seems like there was some type of dance going on. The YMCA had sock hops. And the thing about the sock hops, when you went in there, you hung up your jacket and you took your shoes off because they didn't want people bringing in dirt or grime on their basketball court. And that was all well and good. They were well attended and usually had bands or had some type of music playing. But the thing I learned real quick, you didn't want to wear your best coat or jacket, and you didn't want to wear your best pair of shoes because if they were expensive, a lot of times they would come up missing, and it was just kind of an open area, and somebody could easily go by and pick up a jacket they thought might look good on them or a pair of shoes that look really good. So we always learned to wear an old raggedy jacket and an old raggedy pair of shoes, and nobody ever seemed to bother them. And also there was an area, I know this didn't last but about a year, but underneath the stage at the old YMCA, the old memorial building, I don't know, I think it was my junior year, 67, 68, or 66, 67, that there was a group of males called the Community Preps. And I think John Gates was the president. And they were involved in several community activities. And they started it was kind of like a coffee club type thing, but it was really, they served Cokes. They were open a couple of days a week in the afternoon, and you could go in there after school and sit down at a table and drink a Coke, and they had somebody working there, and they had an outside entrance. You didn't have to go through the YMCA to get there. And the place was called the Pink Elephant, and I don't know who came up with that name, but then they started having some music on a Fridays or Saturday night. And they would actually have bands in there, and it was a really tight area, and it would really get crowded. And it was kind of had the same nature. You didn't have to take off your shoes, but you just piled your coat up on a table when you walked in, again, if you wore a real nice jacket or coat, sometimes it might come up missing. But that only lasted a little while, and it was kind of hard. They had to volunteers, and then you had to have supervisors working the weekends, and it may have lasted one school year. I don't know. Some people went to Teen Town, which was down on Prince Street. It was on the second level, and I think it was up over top of the old Cole supermarket. And Teen Town at that time was ran by the police department. And I know one of the guys that volunteered a lot there was a guy by the name of Charlie McCormick. And they would charge you 50 cents or something to get in. And you could play pool for free. They did serve, had concession. And they usually have a band on Saturday nights and dances. And it was a place for a lot of kids to go hanging out. But I wasn't, I went to Teen Town quite a bit. Never did go skating much. People from East Beckley, we didn't go skating too often. One, if you didn't have the transportation, kind of hard to get there. And two, sometimes the guys from Crab Orchard and MacArthur area didn't get along very well with the East Beckley guys, so the turf, it wasn't exactly our turf. Then every once in a while they would, Maxwell Hill Community Center, somebody would rent it and they would have a band and charge people to get in the dance. And so those were some of the popular areas for teenagers to go to. Now some of the bands, there was one group called the Midnight Beats, and now keep in mind, these guys weren't old enough to play in liquor clubs or places that served alcohol, but they were a very accomplished group. Danny Pike played the bass, and John Stinson was a guitar player. Mark Treadway played the keyboard. Cliff and Jeff Stedham played guitar and drums. And the Stedham boys, their dad Garney he used to run the Ashland Oil and Gas, and Johnny Stinson's dad, John, great guy. He was kind of their manager and overseer, and he would take them around. And they were a busy group and really talented bunch of guys. And all those, as far as I know, all those guys are still alive. And this is 50-some years later, and it'd be nice to see the Midnight Beats get a reunion group back together and play a couple of times. I don't know whether I know Danny, he played in several bands after the Midnight Beats, but I'm not sure about the other guys. There was another group called the Soul Set, and I'm not sure who all was in that. I know Mike George played guitar, and I think George Campbell played the drums in that group, but I'm not sure who some of the other members were. Danny Bailey, who has made a living and was a great guitar player, and I think he last played with Taylor Made. He played with Soul Set a little bit, and then he went over and played with the Imperials, and he's played with numerous groups. Nelson Staples, who's a reverend now, he sang with, I think, the Soul Set for a little bit, and then sang with the Imperials, and a pretty good entertainer as far as that was concerned. Then there was a big group called the Red Barons, and most of those guys were in the class that I graduated with. And Roger Hicks, extremely talented guy, could play anything, horns, guitar, keyboard, and he went with his brother Russ Hicks and made a living in Nashville in music. And Roger's passed away now, but last time I saw him was at Tamarack, and he was playing, it was in a tribute to Little Jimmy Dickens, and got to speak with him a little bit, and he very talented, and it's a shame that we had to lose him so soon. But then there were some other guys, Mayor Pugh, Emmett Pugh, he played in that group. There was Phil Chouquette played. Paul Ragland, he was a very talented keyboard player. Beef Whitener played the drums some. Mark Houchins played. And David Lyons, who I graduated with, he was the lead singer, and he sang with several groups. After that, David had a great voice. I remember we were on the track team together, and when we would go on the bus on some of these away track mates, David would entertain us with singing a little bit a cappella, and he was really good. And I think later he spent most of his time singing in church, but he's still alive as far as I know. Then it was, but the Red Bears was a big group. They played a lot of soul music, had a lot of horns. I don't know who all played there, but they were really, really extremely good. Then there was a group from around the Callaway Heights area, and I don't know exactly what they called themselves, but Richard Tolliver, Lonnie Tolliver, Engelbert Arndt, Ike Shamlin. Those are some of the guys I can remember. And Ike was the lead singer in that group, and they played a lot at Teen Town, and they played a lot at the Maxwell Hill Community Center. And Ike was a feisty little guy, and he was a good singer, and he would put on a show just by himself. But those guys were, again, they mainly made their money at parties or homecoming games or homecoming dances or proms and things like that. And some of them carried on their music talent after high school. But just wanted to reiterate, during the summer months, they had dances at Little Beaver Park. Now, this wasn't the Little Beaver record hop that they used to have with Rod Odell. This was after that. And they had a band there quite consistently on a Saturday night. And I think they were from the Midway, Coal City area. And unfortunately, I can't remember the name. I think a guy named Eddie Jenkins played one of the guitars, and they were really good. If you think of who that might be, get in touch with me, awbennett50@gmail.com. And there was I started singing with a group. Danny Pack playing the guitar, Bobby Holly played the keyboard, and John Tanner played the drums. And we practiced over at John's house, had real good equipment, and we played one time at a party, and then we just kind of split up after that. Of course, Danny went on and played with the Midnight Beats and several other bands later. Bobby went and played with the Peanut Holly and the Hallmarks, and John, he played several different areas. He ended up, I think Bobby and John ended up playing in the church quite often. And then I went with a group called the 69th Edition, and it was made up of Kendall Moore, who was a keyboard player, and Kendall was really, really talented. He was the main reason why we didn't have a lead guitar, because he could handle about everything. Lacey Aliff, he played rhythm guitar. Joe Rodriguez, who was actually Frank Rodriguez's son, he played the bass, and David Miller played the drums. And we were together about a year, played a few homecoming games and different parties, a few things like that. And Kendall, he made a living at it, playing music later. And unfortunately, Kendall and David have both passed on. Lacey, I think he's down in Florida now, living the good life. And I'm not sure what Joe's doing, but I'm sure he's doing something good. And that was the 69th edition. That since we were talking about bands in the area, but it just seemed like there was always music anywhere you went. Another thing I wanted to talk about was I don't know if you're older and how you made money when you grew up. If you made money, maybe you were on an allowance, or maybe you had to go out and make your money, or whatever. But there weren't as many avenues at that time. But when I grew up in East Beckley, a lot of the guys made money by caddying over at Black Knight Country Club. And they didn't have golf carts back then. And I don't even think they had pull carts at that time. And so the guys would go over there, and you would sign up as a caddy, and then they would give you a number, and sometimes it involved a metal tag that you'd put on your hat. And if somebody came in and needed a caddy, then they would call your number. So you just kind of hung out. And then once you got to know some of the golfers, then they would ask for you if you were there, or sometimes they would call you ahead of time and tell you they're going to be there at a certain time. And these guys would carry a set of bags around, 9 holes, and at that time they didn't make a whole lot of money. They make 65 cents, 75 cents, and this was in the 60s, early 60s. And sometimes they would carry 2 bags. Imagine a kid 13, 14 years old carrying 2 golf bags. But usually the golfers, most of them would tip also. They would pay a certain fee, and they would tip you. So the caddies, they learned who the best tippers were. And that's who they would always try to get fixed up with if they could. But I never caddied. My brother caddied a lot, but by the time I got old enough to caddy, they started getting some pull carts in, but they also was kind of phasing out caddies a little bit. But my mother didn't exactly want me over there caddying, because my brother would stay till dark a lot of times because people played golf that late. We didn't have, I didn't have a lawnmower to mow people's lawn. Some people still cut their lawns with push mowers that didn't have motors on them. But if you had enough to buy a lawnmower, you could get some business like that. So I took out a paper route. And ironically, my mother didn't want me staying out late to play, to caddy golf. But she didn't mind me getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning and going and deliver papers. And I delivered papers for a little over 4 years, and always had a morning route. And one time I had 2 morning routes, and I delivered papers all the way up in the high school. And at that time, of course, nowadays they have guys that deliver papers in cars, and they come by, they put it in your mailbox, and sometimes they have plastic or throw it out on your driveway or whatever. But we didn't do that, and involved mainly the guys deliver papers were anywhere from age 12 to 16 years old, and people only paid 50 cents a week for the Beckley paper. And we would have to collect every Friday or Saturday and turn in our paper bill on Monday. And then whatever you had left after the paper bill, then that was your profit. And the morning delivery, in all the years that I delivered the papers, I never was approached by anybody, tried to get me in a car. I never felt unsafe at all. We actually kind of watched out for each other. Some of the guys around my neighborhood that delivered the papers was a guy named Dickie Farish. There was a guy named Mike Walker, lived over in the bowling edition in Beckley. Danny Pike, my brother-in-law. A guy named Bill Cox. There were Pat Murphy. He delivered around the bowling edition at that time had about 3 paper routes because it was such a big area and most people took the paper. We had paper bosses. There was a Mr. Bates and I can't remember it wasn't Norman Bates, but Psycho. But there was also a Mr. Lilly. He was kind of the head of the Charleston paper, and the paper bosses would get up in the morning and usually drive by and make sure that the papers were getting in the right hands. And we would pick our newspapers up at the first paper route I had was at Atkinson Supermarket on Johnstown Road in Beckley. And then when I got 2 paper routes, I picked up the first one at Gunther Supermarket on South Canal Street, right down below Lincoln School. I would deliver down through Russell Street and Jefferson Street in that area. And when I'd run out, then I'd pick up my other bundle for my second route at Atkinson Supermarket. And I would go out Vine Street, Glen Avenue, and Orchard Avenue. And Dickie and a couple of those guys, they would do Mankin and Dorcas. And so we kind of watched. Sometimes we'd help each other out, or if one day one guy might be sick and the other one would help out, may deliver the papers for him. And it was kind of a congenial group. Now we carried papers in these cloth bags, kind of like a denim type cloth. And when it rained, it was really tough to keep the papers dry. And a lot of people wanted their newspapers behind the doors. Some of them wanted them in the mailbox on the porch, and those kind of things. And we tried to accommodate them, but sometimes they would have a fenced yard, they have a dog out or whatever, and we just threw the paper on the porch if we could get it there. We didn't use rubber bands or plastic or anything. Back then there was a certain way you could fold. Newspaper boys knew how to fold the paper and they could throw it. And but especially the people that tipped well on Friday, we made sure they got the paper the way they wanted it. And we knew who the great tippers were. Also, it gave you an opportunity. The people you delivered papers to would get you sometimes to come and work for them. And I mowed 2 or 3 lawns using the paper customers' lawnmowers, and sometimes would go do odd jobs. So we were able to make money that way. And I delivered papers up until I was in the 12th grade, and I actually had a motorcycle. I bought a motorcycle with the money I made from the paper route, and drove a motorcycle about the last year that I had delivering papers. So it was, now I know here locally where we live in the Stanford, West Virginia area, we have a guy, Chris Williams, has been my newspaper guy for over 30 years, and of course now they, like I said, they deliver in automobiles and put it in your mailbox, or throw it in your driveway or whatever. But Chris he delivers our Beckley paper and our Charleston paper, and so he's been at it for quite a while. But they don't come around and collect. They put a bill in your paper and you're supposed to send it in. I guess if you don't send it in at a certain time, they cut the paper off. And that was one of the difficult parts about delivering papers back in my day. Like I said, you usually went around on Friday evening and collected, and if it was in the fall, I'd want to go to a football game, so I'd try to run around and collect as quickly as I could. And sometimes people wouldn't be home from work yet, or we'd have to catch them on Saturdays. And then sometimes people were just hard to catch, not necessarily deliberately, but some were. It was deliberately, they were hard to catch. But sometimes people would go out of town. Sometimes people would just be gone the times we called on them, and it was... sometimes you'd have to go back to their house 2 or 3 times before you got your 50 cents. There were some people that paid by the month, and they paid, instead of $2, like 4 times 50, they would usually pay $2.15. But I didn't have too many people that paid by the month. Most of the times people paid by the week. And the Beckley newspapers, every week, if you turned your bill in, your money for your bill in by Monday at a certain time, they would put a little bit of money in a savings account for you. And so that was kind of an incentive for you to get your money in. And when you quit delivering the papers, they would give you your savings account. And it never really amounted to a whole lot, but it was a way of saving money. And also they would have some incentives occasionally for you to go out and get a new customer. And I know one of their incentives was if you get a new customer, you got to go to the state fair, and they would give you a ride up there on a bus and provide a certain amount of entertainment for you, riding rides and stuff. And I know I went on a couple of trips like that. And the Charleston route that I had when I was in the 9th grade, they had an incentive program, and if you got a couple new customers, they put your name in a hat, and then they had a drawing for people to go to Washington, D.C. by train and view the president's inauguration. And so I got a couple customers. They put my name in a hat, and sure enough, they drew my name out. And I won a trip to President Lyndon Johnson and Vice President Hubert Humphrey. Got to go to Washington, and we rode the train up. They took us to a couple Smithsonian Institute and a couple of places, and then we watched the parade. The night before the night of the inauguration, we went to one of the parties that they had, and we were just kind of like spectators. We weren't participating, but Hubert Humphrey did come to that party. Lyndon Johnson didn't. But the biggest thing I remember about the whole thing, it was cold. It was really cold. And but it was. I took a few pictures here and there, and it was something kind of interesting. But when I got back home, that was in January. Found out about a month or so later, our 9th grade decided they were going to go on a school trip, and they were going to go to Washington, D.C., and my mother kind of talked me out of that, said, you've already been to Washington this year, and, you're just kind of wasting your money. And so I didn't go. And I'm kind of glad I didn't. But it was, but all that was through delivering papers. Again, I never felt like I was unsafe. Nowadays, you wouldn't dare let your 12 or 13-year-old kid go out at 4 o'clock in the morning and walk around in the dark with all the perverts and sickos out there. It's just, it wouldn't be safe. I wouldn't want to do it myself and at my age. But I do know that sometimes, like I said, rain was kind of tough to keep the newspapers dry. Sometimes it'd be extremely cold and it'd be tough, and the snow would be deep, and we would be walking. And guys kind of watched out for each other. There was a Wash It Quick down on Johnstown Road that stayed open 24 hours a day. So sometimes if you got extremely cold, we would go in there and sit and warm up, or maybe take our bundle and pack the bags in the Wash It Quick. And then at the same time, there were milkmen that drove around delivering milk to houses. And on extremely cold weather days, some of the milkmen would let us sit in their truck for a few minutes if we thought we were getting too cold. So everybody kind of watched out for each other, and it was nice. But times have changed, and we can't do that now. But if you want to let me know about any other bands that might have played during the 60s and 70s that you remember, or give me some of the names I might have left out, contact me at awbennett50@gmail.com. I'd like to hear about it, or share with me some of the ways that you've made money when you were growing up. And but until then, just remember, if you ain't dead yet, you ain't done yet. Until next week, God bless you.